Now convening the Minturn Town Council meeting of April 3rd, 2024. And we'd start roll call. Lynn?
In here.
Here.
Yes, here. Eric here.
Terry here.
Earl's here and Brian is traveling, so he will not be here this evening. Next item is the approval of the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull any item here?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We skip anything around here. Okay, approval of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Got a motion by Gusty and a second by Kate. That was Kate, right?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have approval of the regular agenda. Any items being pulled? Okay,
I'll make a motion.
you should.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Motion by Terry, second by Gusty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Does anyone have a declaration of a conflict of interest on any item on our agenda this evening? You should have had one, that way you could just. swing that. You didn't say anything, you'll be gone by then.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Now's a segment of our council meeting where we ask if there's anyone in the public, either present here or online, that would like to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda. Jay, you got anybody?
No, there's nobody in the audience.
Okay, moving on. Next, we have council comments. Lynn, you got anything?
I have nothing.
March 21st, Michelle and myself attended a QQ meeting over in Frisco, and they talked about the Shoshone water right acquisition, and that Michelle put it in the manager's report. And they also had a presentation. It's called Gross Reservoir Expansion Litigation, and that was by the Denver Water District, and they were actually just saying the challenges they've had with it. And then the rest was pretty much legislation updates. And lastly, I'd like to thank everybody that voted. Much appreciated. Thank you. That's all I have.
Eric?
Yeah, ditto what Gussie said. Thanks for everybody for coming out and making your voice heard. We appreciate it. Also attended a climate action collaborative meeting today. Had a lot of good discussion and collaboration with other municipalities around this county and other counties. Some more to come on that.
Just council comments. I am stepping down, and obviously there's a new election, so I wish you all the best of luck up here. It's a lot of work, but it's worthwhile. You'll see me again, I'm sure. I'm still very involved with the Minturn Community Fund, and concert series is almost finalized for the schedule. This year it's going to start the week before July 4th because of the way the holiday actually falls on a Thursday this year. So we'll actually get one extra concert, I mean, technically, on Thursday the 4th. And so look for that schedule. It's almost finalized. And, you know, as far as committees go, I was on the fitness center committee and the wildlife roundtable, both really worthwhile committees. And I would encourage any of you to be a part of those committees. So, but thank you all so much. It's been
Thank you.
Pretty
Very much
amazing.
appreciated. Learned a lot from you. Thank you.
I learned a lot from all of you too. So thank you. And thanks especially to our amazing staff. And Michelle and the chairs, you are an incredible manager. We are so lucky to have you. And I just want it on the record. It is with what we have, our staff rocks. So I hope that future councils always remember that. Yeah, you're welcome.
I just like to echo other council folks that we appreciate the turnout and we've got looking forward to our new council and which Tom is going to be the new seat here in a few minutes. And I wanted to welcome him as well. And other than that, I think we'll move on. Next, we have staff reports.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have my staff report in the packet. If anyone has any questions on the information that's already been provided, I do apologize that I have several additional updates. As it was a pretty busy week or two in between council meetings, and I didn't make it all onto the packet manager update. So number one is the town community survey went live today. Hopefully, all of you received a text on your phones requesting you to take the survey. So the text goes out to all Minturn registered voters with phone numbers accessible for texting. If you did not, no worries. You can also take the survey from the link that's on the town website. And if you're not online, we have physical copies here at Town Hall that you can pick up and fill out and bring back, and we'll fill in the information for anybody that needs to fill out a hard copy. So please help spread the word for some of our folks who are not online. We have hard copies here at Town Hall, or if they need, we're happy to mail them a hard copy and they can mail that back to us. Earl and I attended the Mayor's, Managers, Commissioners, and Partners meeting last week, and there is a new emergency alert app out for everyone that is supposed to be much more user-friendly than Everbridge. So for those of you that might be interested, I look to Earl to remember the name of the app.
It is Reachwell.
Reachwell. So this is, thank you, Eric. And I am needing to get this on my phone as well. I was trying to do it, it didn't work in the meeting. So Reachwell is supposed to be a very user-friendly option, comes in something like 120 different languages for all of our residents who might speak other languages, or for visitors who happen to be in the area, they can download the app as well. And if they're in our service area, they will get notifications too. So we will be promoting that app as we move through the spring and into our wildfire preparedness month, where we will be doing different promotional items about wildfire throughout the entire month.
Is that replacing Everbridge or is that supplemental?
You can still use Everbridge as well. I wanted to just hit very quickly. I wanted to let you all know that I will be doing some educational pieces in the town newsletter, as well as on the town website, about the importance of our town plans. So the community plan, Imagine Minturn, was adopted in 2023. And this is an incredibly important plan that is based on the input of the entire town. And we use these plans as really our guiding light for decision-making for the bigger items that come before the Planning Commission and Council. So although it is incredibly helpful and we're very appreciative of getting public feedback always, these plans are what constitute the town's feedback. And so they're a great opportunity to reference when we are looking at PUDs, new projects. The plans are really our reference and our guiding source for helping to make decisions. In addition to everyone else here tonight, I also want to thank everybody who took the time to participate in the democratic process of voting. I want to go one further step and thank our clerks. Our clerks are really the unsung heroes of election days. Jay was here before 6 a.m. getting everything ready through 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. He has done this, without a glitch for the last 26 years. And we're incredibly lucky to have him. So I just want to say thank you to Jay. We're lucky that it was so smooth. What's interesting is our election did come with a tie. So Jay actually is in the process of what's called canvassing right now, which is closing out the election. And there are actually quite a few rules at the state level that you have to follow. And ours gets a little quirky because you have to close out an election within 10 days.
10 days.
And Brian Rodine is out of town. So we are trying to determine if we can close out our election without having identified who would have the 2-year term and who would have the 4-year term out of the 2 candidates that tied. So we're checking with the state on that right now.
We're going with yes.
Right. Jay's trying not to stress out. Just so you all know, the State Streets for All grant that Minturn received, that's an $80,000 grant to help identify all of our streets through town, crash patterns through town, and ways that we can start making our roads safer, especially not just for cars. We in our RFP that was put together a couple days ago, we are focusing on cycling and pedestrians, and how we can make all of our roads safer in town for those mobilities. So that RFP is going to go live this Friday. It'll be out for a month, and then the finalists will come in the form of a contract to the council to sign. I will be looking for a council member to help sign up to take part in that activity. So more to come on that. I have approved an update to the appointment questionnaire. Again, sorry for all my updates. We traditionally, when we have a vacancy on a council or planning commission, we request letters of interest. Those letters of interest can be anything from a text or email saying, I want to be considered for council, to a full-blown letter. And what we're trying to do with this new system is streamline and get more information out of the candidates that are interested in applying, so that that information can come before the council in the packet and be available to the public before they come to interview. So there will be now a page of questions asking them to fill it out in advance so that it goes in the packet, and then the council will have that information in advance of the interview process. So.
Good idea.
Will that be on the town website? Like, will it be available online, or is
Yes, so when a vacancy opens, it will be available online for folks to fill out if they want to be considered. Yes,
So will we be using that for Tom's vacancy on P and Z?
yes.
Okay.
Mhm. So we had an RFP out for Bell and Bridge. I've been keeping y'all updated. Bell and Bridge, you know, she's getting up there in age, bless her. She's had some pretty rough bridge inspections, and we're needing to either repair the bridge or replace the bridge. We have done a feasibility RFP to hire an engineering firm to determine, do we need to repair it or replace it? Because if the repair cost is close to the replacement cost, there's no point in repairing. So we are in the midst of selecting a firm from that RFP process. Jeff Spinell and I interviewed all of the applicants last week. There were 3 firms that submitted for the RFP process. Prices for that project ranged from $59,000 to $114,000. And that money will come out of the capital improvements budget line item. So once we have that RFP done, we'll know if we need to repair or replace, and we'll know what kind of grants we need to go after next.
Quick question, the pipe, is that going to, are we gonna do any repair work on that while we're doing the bridge? Does the pipe, the main go underneath the bridge?
I believe that goes under the river, not under the bridge. Like it's underground.
Okay.
Yeah, so I couldn't tell you, but I would say it's not currently in the scope of work for them to examine that aspect of the area. Railroad Avenue improvements. So you all know that the town went, after Minturn North got approved, the town went and got a grant for putting sidewalks along Railroad Avenue all the way to where the eco trail will end at the Minturn North project. In that grant application, one of the questions was, do you have all the approvals you need? And I answered yes. And then I had a talk with the railroad, who said, oh, we have to get approval from the Public Utilities Commission, which is no small task. So I am meeting with CDOT, who supported our grant, to tell them that I provided inaccurate information and to see what they say. So we'll see what comes from that. That was a $225,000 grant, I think, 225, somewhere in there. So we'll see, fingers crossed that they'll work with me. You all should start preparing for interviews. So you are all going to be doing 45-minute interviews in preparation for our strategic planning council retreat So I guess Terry's off the hook on this one. So in advance of the council retreat, the firm, Government Planning Solutions will be, looking for each of you to contact them to set up an interview to talk about the things you want to see with the town, the things you want to talk about at a retreat, and how we can make this as functional as possible when we have your time on May 9th. May 9th is the council retreat.
Where is that gonna be?
You know, we're determining a location now. I reached out to Vail today to see about their room at the top of Lion's Head parking structure. So pending free. So we'll see what happens. It'll be hopefully somewhere not in town hall, not in Minturn, hopefully somewhere out of town.
No beach in the cards.
Yep, they recommended having someplace out of town where everybody could collaborate and feel camaraderie in a new location. And then my very last thing is, I just wanted to emphasize, and Mike and I talked about this earlier today, and Mike, I think I can cover this, but that the code is silent on the need to vacate a seat during, if you're on two boards, or if you want to be on two boards, but Mike, in his perfectly firm lawyer way, said, that's not how it works, Michelle. He said, you cannot be on both boards. And he had a much better explanation as to why. So Mike, if you want to unmuck what I just said.
Oh, no, that's a good recap of what we talked about. So the issue is, can one serve simultaneously on the council and on the P&Z? And I would note there are a few communities in Colorado that I'm aware of where their code actually provides that one of the seats on the P&Z will be filled by a sitting council person. A Minturn does not have that code provision. The P&Z members, at least since I've been on the board, have always been separate and distinct from the council. And because many of the decisions that are run through the P&Z are what we call a quasi-judicial decision. In my mind, that means that the members of council need to receive the same information in the same public hearings as each other in order to render a final decision. So my interpretation is that if you're on council, you cannot simultaneously be on P&Z unless we were to amend the code to allow for that. So.
Mike, thank you so much. I was contemplating this morning that perhaps Tom Priest would just be so excited to stay on both.
I don't even know what we're talking about.
So, we reached out to Mike to make sure we got it all straight. And Gusty, you had asked about previously if folks on Historic Preservation Commission could serve on Planning Commission. And at that meeting, I told you that the code was silent on that. And I thought, yes. But that is not a question I have posed to Mike Sawyer, who I now think I need to pose that to for him to contemplate, and not at this time, but for him to just contemplate in general and get back to us. So just as a heads up, like so many other things, I could very well have been wrong. So again, I apologize for all those additional updates, but that's it.
All right. Any questions for Michelle on anything else?
I kind of read on there, on the congressional direct spending, sounds like you'll have to go through Joe Nagusa's office for water grants like we got in the past. Are we gonna do that again too?
Yes, we are.
Okay. great,
Yes,
thank you.
and his office and the House specifically has that water option that is not available in the Senate. And so that's why we're going through
Going through his office.
specifically.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michelle.
Yep.
No special presentations this evening.
No,
So now we come to the grand item. So we will be, I believe, Jay, do you want to give the outline or? Go
It'll
ahead.
be rough. I'm gonna swear you in and then you'll swear in the other candidates. Very, thank you, by the way, for giving me
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Terry.
Lynn, would you do me a massive favor and make sure the green light is on your mic?
You don't want to hang out for this whole meeting?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because when I was upstairs, it was a little quiet.
I know.
If anybody has any questions about what the issue is with the 2-year, 4-year and the tie, we can go through that, but it's pretty simple. We have a tie, so it's easy. It's resolved by lot, which means probably drawing cards, which means we have to wait for,
It's the Minturn way.
well,
I don't know if you
I-
said that.
I actually thought live rounds of ammo. Michelle thought, axe throwing, but then we realized we would probably open up a vacancy and then that's,
Start all
Throwing at each other.
oh,
I've been accidentally target.
I did too.
We're digressing.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so the election went off real well. Everything worked out balanced and whatnot, and we're ready to go forward.
Okay.
Earl, if you're ready to get sworn in.
Yeah, I will do that, and just so you know, I've signed all of y'all's certificates, and you'll need to sign yours and give them back to. Just give it to Michelle, and she'll give them to Jay, and then he'll do what he needs to do with them, make copies of them, and they'll get them back to you.
If we stand underneath the green light, that's a microphone.
Okay,
Okay, raise your right hand. I, Earl Bedez,
I, Earl
Can
Bedez.
you turn around so that the camera can see your face?
Rotate 90 degrees.
I, Earl Bedez,
I, Earl Bedez,
do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution
do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution
and laws of the United States,
and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
the constitutions and laws of the state of Colorado,
and the ordinances of the town of Minturn,
and the ordinances of the town of Minturn,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties of the office of mayor upon which I'm about to enter.
I will faithfully perform the duties as mayor of the office that I'm about to enter.
Yes,
I screwed up one time.
congratulations.
Thank you, appreciate it, yeah. All right. Now it's y'all's turn, let's do it all at the same time, so everybody. Stand in front of the tables. Circle around. Okay, please repeat after me.
Raise your hand.
Raise your right hand. I'll even raise mine. I state your name.
I, Gusty Kanakis,
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution
do solemnly swear that I'll support the Constitution
and the laws of the United States,
and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
the Constitution and the laws of the state of Colorado,
and the ordinances of the town of Minturn,
and the ordinance of the town of Minturn,
that I will faithfully perform all the duties
that I'll faithfully perform all the duties
of the office of the town council member
of the office of the town council member
upon which I am about to enter.
on which I'm about to enter.
Excellent. So here's your certificates. Eric. I'm not here. Tom, your ribbon. No. I get a crown though. You get a crown. Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna go for a walk.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you, guys.
What's up?
Yeah. Eric, you got one. Water.
Yes. I will, yes. Now at this time, I would like to nominate my mayor pro tem. And I select Eric Gatto to do so. Do you accept my nomination?
I accept.
Okay, and at this, I would ask for a motion to approve, and we'll just need a majority that likes Eric enough to vote for him.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Gusty, a second by Kate. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that is done. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 3, series 2023, second reading. An ordinance disconnecting Rex Flats, Gilman, and the Rosser Pile 5 from the town of Minturn. You want to take that? You want to do that or?
Mike Sawyer is with us tonight
Okay.
and we'll discuss, I don't believe there are any updates, but he will discuss if there were any changes.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything new to report as council members will remember from the prior meeting, and I guess a little bit of background for Tom. The settlement agreement with Battle Mountain contemplates that we are going to disconnect, that is, maybe a more common term would be de-annex environmentally contaminated properties from the town. Staff had a number of conversations with both Battle Mountain as well as with our environmental attorney, Polly Jessup, to identify which parcels were appropriate for disconnection. There are three, the Rex Flat area, what's called roster pile number 5, which runs along the Eagle River from Rex Flat south toward Belden, and then the Gilman property. And the ordinance before you includes all three of those areas. This is one of the items under the settlement agreement that will become immediately active or take effect. Most of the settlement approvals require what we kind of a consummation of all the different approvals, and then they get enacted through a closing. This disconnection will take effect once it's legally effective under the town charter and the state statute. So we recommend approval. Let's let Eagle County utilize their resources to keep track of what is sometimes some complex environmental issues up there. Let the town focus on matters more pertinent to the town. So happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions from the board? Okay. So there's no changes to anything from the first reading, so we entertain a motion.
Excuse me, sir, this is a public hearing. We would need to open that up.
Put it up for public hearing. Anybody there?
No, there isn't, but
Okay. Close public hearing. Now we can do a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 3, series 2024 on second reading. An ordinance approving disconnection of real property from the town of Minturn.
Yes.
Motion by Gusty, second by Kate. Roll call, please.
Then I.
Tom, aye.
Kate,
Gusty, aye.
Eric, I.
And Earl. Aye. All right. Bye-bye, Gilman. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 4, 2024. Second reading, an ordinance amending the chapter 19 of the Historic Preservation Code to allow for noticing of demolition prior to permit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this came before you all as first reading at the last council meeting, and at that reading, it was identified that council would like to see the opportunity for a permit to take place up to 360 days after initial approval or determination of non-historic dedication. And I am looking through this ordinance right now, and I'm not seeing that change being in here. I am seeing subsection D of item 7 of section 19.9.10, identifying the 180-day option approval is made if the applicant has failed to procure the permit or if the work authorized by such permit has not commenced. But I'm not seeing the option for the administrative approval of up to 360 days. So at this point, Madison says she did make the change to the ordinance. At this point, I would request a tabling of this ordinance to ensure we get the right copy in front of you all, to ensure that we're approving the right ordinance. Continue to a date certain, which would be April 17th, 2024.
Thank you, Michelle. There's no question for Michelle from the board. I'll open the public hearing. Anything, Jay?
excuse me, no, there is not.
Close the public hearing. So I will entertain the motion.
I'll make, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to continue ordinance number 4, series 2024, and ordinance town of Minturn, amending chapter 19, article 9 of the Minturn Municipal Code to April 17th. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Kate, second by Gusty. Roll call, please.
Lynn, I.
Yeah.
Gusty, I.
Eric, guy.
And Earl. All right. That's all the business items. Next item is discussion and direction items. The first one being Battle North restricted parcels. And Mike.
I am gonna work on that. I may need a little help from Michelle. I can't see the who's in the audience. Is Tim with us today?
Yes, Tim is here. Mhm.
Okay. We were also joined by Lindsay Lido. Lindsay is an attorney for Battle Mountain who's been working with the town on various Battle Mountain issues. So we've got her available as well. So we're coming to you for some direction related to an implementation item in the settlement agreement with Battle Mountain. As current council members will remember, and a little education for Tom, under the settlement agreement, the town is going to receive certain lands in what we lawyers call fee title. That's more commonly just thought of as standard ownership. Those parcels are the Highlands parcel, which is located back behind the old Bolts Lake reservoir, an area near the Bolts Lake Reservoir called the South Reservoir parcel. There are a couple of small parcels down along the Eagle River that, oh, thank you very much. Perfect. Yeah. So the yellow that you can see on the map are the town parcels that we would receive through the settlement. So parcels 1 and 2 are the Highlands. Parcel 5 is the Reservoir South parcel. You can see the couple of small little parcels down by the river in yellow. And then parcel 11, which is next to the Minturn Fitness Center, would be land for a potential future recreation center for the town. The green parcels are what are the battle retained parcels. Those are essentially the lands upon which future development by Battle Mountain can occur. And council, for those of you who were present for the rezoning, you'll remember that essentially 2 zone districts were created for Battle's retained property. There is a mixed use zone district, and there is a residential zone district that applied to the green parcels. And those parcels have already been zoned at this point. The pink parcels are what are called the restricted parcels. And those are lands that for at least now will be retained in the ownership of Battle Mountain, subject to certain rights of the town and restrictions on use. And that those parcels will then undergo potentially some environmental remediation in some cases, or in other cases be used in the context of constructing Bolts Lake Reservoir, and that the town has an option where they can acquire fee title to these parcels in the future if they so desire. And so for the pink parcels, which I think are going to be the ones that we're going to talk the most about, they require decisions related to whether the town would like to have a purchase option for them, whether there are specific restrictions that we need to put in place with respect to those parcels, and then whether there are certain reserved rights that Battle Mountain would retain over those parcels in the future. Let's see. Yeah. So with respect to each of these, you saw we drafted a staff memo. If you had an opportunity to take a look at that, describing the various kind of pieces of information that we need council to give us some direction on, because that will allow us to prepare some future covenants that would apply to the restricted parcels, both granting the town purchase rights in the future, as well as restricting potential uses, as well as granting the town certain uses by easement in the future. With respect to the purchase options for parcels that we identify, the term of those purchase options under the settlement agreement is 25 years. The idea there is that gives Battle Mountain and ERWSD, who will be constructing Bolts Lake Reservoir, sufficient time to implement those plans, and for the town then to make educated decisions about whether it does want to acquire fee ownership of those parcels. The purchase price is $1, so the amount of money is really not a defining issue in whether the town would acquire ownership of these parcels.
And Mike, if I
see-
can just interject to
Yes.
say that the
Uh-huh.
town has already identified which items have already been decided on as purchase options, and that has been communicated to the EPA and CDPHE as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we're joined also by Polly Jessen, who is our environmental attorney, who's been guiding us through some of the complex environmental issues that pertain to the contaminated parcels out at Battle Mountain. Polly has prepared a chart that identifies each parcel and kind of the rights that the town wants to obtain in the parcel and any restrictions that the town wants to have imposed on those parcels. And in a second, I'll ask Jay to go down to that chart. Before doing that, I do want to note that when we talk about the restricted parcels and what additional constraints we want to put on potential future uses of those parcels, it's important to recognize that those parcels have been zoned under the town code as open space. And there are certain kind of additional rights other than just leaving the property open that are allowed under the open space zone district. For example, Battle Mountain or a successor can construct a water treatment plant in the open space zone district. But by and large, the rights to use that property into the future would be, as a matter of zoning as opposed to covenant, would be limited to open space uses such as recreation. And that any change to that zoning would of course have to come back before the P&Z and the town council for approval. So we have kind of two levels of ability to control what happens on the restricted parcels. There is the zoning, and then there is the ability to impose kind of covenants that would run with the land and be recorded against the title to the property as part of the settlement process. I guess, Polly, if you had anything you wanted to interject at this point, give you a chance, and we can turn our attention to the table and getting some direction from staff or from the council.
I think the only thing that I would interject is the chart that's attached is a version of what council has seen before, with the addition of two columns. One is a summary of parcel by parcel, the types of zoning and restrictions that are already specified in the settlement agreement executed between the parties. And then the final column is really the types of additional restrictions that we were focusing on today principally. Although I think, you know, some of the existing restrictions are subject to further discussion, in particular options to purchase and moving parcels that you take title to immediately versus later. However, those we have already
discussed once and have presented to EPA, as Michelle mentioned.
Thank you. Jay, in the packet, just after my memo was a map showing kind of a colored map that shows 2 yellow lines on that one. Yep, that one right there. So one of the items, and I think this is more informational than it is that there's anything to do. Under the settlement agreement, Battle Mountain has the obligation to provide the town with an access and utility easement to connect the Highlands parcel with Tigawon Road. And Tim has worked on identifying what he thinks are the two viable routes, easement routes, that would provide access to the Highlands parcel that the town will obtain fee ownership. One comes kind of directly off of Tigawon Road and makes its way onto the Highlands parcel to the, what would that be, the southwest, I'm guessing. The other one makes a kind of a more roundabout way to the Highlands parcel, getting close to the reservoir area and kind of skirting around the old tailings pile. And Battle Mountain is not requesting that we choose one over the other. Rather, they are willing to grant both of those easements to the town as part of the closing. We are running these easement options by the town engineer, Jeff Spinell, and we'll work on getting kind of final legal descriptions put together for those easements in the near future. If there are any kind of thoughts or questions about the easements to get to the Highlands, would be happy to receive feedback or answer any questions about that.
Yeah, Mike, I like using both of those roads because if you look at the where the Highlands parcel is split by wetlands and the Bolt Stitch and so forth. And so each one would give independent access to each side of the Highlands property.
And Tim, if I've misstated anything, please jump up and chime in. But again, the discussion we had was that the Battle was willing to grant both of those easements to the town.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Tim McGuire, 164 Railroad. You're correct, Mike. We'd be happy to provide access to both. And the one on the left side of the page follows the existing road that goes up to the Highlands now. So it could probably be used almost immediately with some tree clearing and trimming. And the one to the right would require tree clearing and some grading to get access. The benefit on the one to the right is it very likely could be used during reservoir construction because it would not be impacted by putting fill on the OTP area, where the one on the left probably would.
Lynn?
Yeah, I just had a question about grade. Do both of those easements have a reasonable grade?
Yeah, the one on the left, again, it's probably less than 5 or 6%. It's not a very steep road. If anyone's hiked it, I know Michelle has, and a few of the other council members have. The one on the right will require some grading. It's kind of up and down right now, so you'd have to clear the trees and flatten that out. But at the end of the day, it's not too steep of a grade to access that site.
It would be under 7.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Comment, questions?
I have questions on the OTP to get up to speed, but not on the easements.
Well, let's go ahead and address that. You want to discuss that process that we're going through with the OTP?
For the OTP?
Well, go ahead, Tim, if that's a convenient time to talk about the OTP, sure.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick update and then if you have more questions, let me know. But the plan currently is to take the material out of the reservoir when they dig the reservoir deeper. And they estimate there's going to be about 500,000 yards of material that come out of that reservoir. An extremely large amount. That reservoir is going to get 20 to 30 feet deeper than it currently is, and it's going to grow in size as well. And then all the material in the reservoir is currently clean. It's been tested and none of it was affected by any of the mine tailings that were historically put on the area. So that material would be brought to that area that's hatched in green there. That's called the processing area. It's one of the areas the town is going to acquire. The processing area is also clean. It's not contaminated at all. But our agreement with the water district is they would use that area to process the material when it comes out of the reservoir, screen it and segregate it into different sizes. And then we would cap the OTP site so that it creates a barrier between any residual contamination that's left on the ground and gives a minimum of 3 feet, but in some areas it's going to be as steep as 20 feet of cover over that site. So that at that point, once it's remediated and capped, it could be used for residential use. There would be no use restrictions on it, except for you couldn't dig into the groundwater anymore. We have submitted a preliminary work plan to discuss how we're going to do this and what we're going to do to the EPA. They approved it, so it's been vetted and they've approved it. We'd have to submit a final work plan that shows final grades and everything when the time is right to do that.
So based on that, just to verify, residential to include all horizontal infrastructure, no limitation based on that cap process.
Exactly. In areas where the cap is only 3 feet, you could still put utilities in. You would just have to have a method where if you do pierce that area and go into some of the restricted soils, you'd have to dispose of those or put them back in the hole in a certain way.
Tim, just for clarification, will there be an ID barrier as well?
What barrier?
I'm sorry, an ID barrier to show where the fill.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there will be an ID barrier. So we'll put either a certain layer of material or even a mesh plastic construction fencing on the ground so that anyone who's digging knows they're now going to pierce the contaminated soil area.
And I'm sorry, this particular post work falls in the dollar purchase option category?
Yes, you would be obtaining it after all that work was done.
And one thing to think about too is, Tim had offered that, once we have figured out what we want to do with the OTP after it's remediated, he can contour the land. Is that?
Yeah, it would have to happen as that work is occurring, but yes, it could happen.
So yeah, we want to do some hard thinking about the OTP and how we want it to end up, because they could do some feature contouring and so forth to fit what our needs are. So that's just something we have to figure out later.
And Mr. Mayor, I kind of appreciate you bringing this up. So, with respect to the yellow parcels that we looked at on the prior map that are the parcels that the town will at closing acquire in fee title. Those are zoned under a holding zone, which means that the town will need in the next couple of years to undertake a planning process to determine how they should be used and what uses are going to be legally allowed under the zoning on those parcels.
We lose your mic?
The
Mike, could you start over? You dropped out on us.
Sorry about that. So the parcels that the town is acquiring in fee title, which are the yellow parcels on the map, those are zoned as a holding district process in the future to determine how they should be used. The option parcels, which are the restricted parcels, which were pink parcels on the map. Those are zoned open space. And so once the town acquires those parcels, a future planning process would begin, or I guess we could do that before, acquisition, so that if there were things such as grading that needed to be considered both by the town and by Battle Mountain, we could get that to Battle Mountain in a timely manner. But again, the future uses of these parcels will be determined through future planning. And I guess with respect to the OTP in particular, because it is going to be a usable property, engaging in that planning process contemporaneously, where we consider the Highlands and the other parcels the town's going to acquire in fee at closing, probably makes sense. So, Polly, the chart. So Jay, if you could go down to page 59, the first page of the chart. The chart includes a column that talks about the town's uses or potential town uses. Do you want to provide council a little bit of an explanation as to why we're talking about that at the current time?
So one of the reasons we were talking about potential uses is for purposes of working with EPA to have some assurances that those uses would be available. And if we, this has been kind of a multi-staged discussion, but we will, the town will have at closing two potential forms of, I guess, assurance or protection from EPA. First of all, they'll have what's called a comfort letter, which is a commitment, or I shouldn't say a commitment, but an opinion from EPA about what kinds of uses are appropriate given the environmental condition of the parcel at the time the site has been remediated. And at this point, this site is, we call it closed or remediated. The existing administrative orders that Tim and his team at Battle have put in place are intended to allow redevelopment of these parcels up to and including residential use. So that administrative order is the second form of protection the town will receive, is the ability to take on the protections and guidance of that order, so that if any redevelopment happens, that order will have a process for interacting with EPA for approval of plans, and covenants not to sue and protection from third-party claims associated with contamination on the site. So very important piece of that. In order to work through the details of how what EPA would say to us and the uses that we wanted to clear for EPA consideration, we had a discussion, I think it's been about 6 weeks ago, and these were the uses that came out of that discussion, and are now the subject of what's so-called comfort letter from EPA that's in the final stages of drafting.
Polly, some of these parcels are within the Superfund site, others are outside. How does the process you described and the potential future uses affect parcels that are outside of the designated boundaries?
It can, there's a frustrating complexity with the Superfund law, or CERCLA, which is that it defines the boundaries of Superfund sites as the extent of contamination. And so what EPA has done is in its comfort letter is confirm that they consider these parcels to be outside the Superfund site and to have no EPA concerns over what we do with them.
Thank you. So what I would propose to do after council has a chance maybe to ask any questions that have arisen thus far would be to walk through this chart which again, council has seen before, and get your direction at fine tuning any items that we need to work on as we start drafting closing documents and restrictive covenants with Battle Mountain. Any subsequent questions from council that we can answer?
Jerry, do you have any questions at this time?
No.
Dusty?
I had one on the easements that was going to the original tailings pond. Was the one on the left, I knew where we walked at that one day, I understand it, but the one on the right, is it gonna be coming off the Tigawan Road on the bottom? I couldn't quite tell by the map, because I had the yellow piece there, I assumed that was a boundary, and then the blue line, and I tried to follow it, but I couldn't tell if it was coming off the Tigawan Road, or if it went past the road and then tied in.
Yeah, no, it comes off of Tigawan just before the old gate that's still there. That's the edge of our property.
Okay,
So it's just before that gate, you kind of take a left and then you reach that gate.
Mhm.
It's right at that knuckle there. That's where,
Okay.
so it would come off Tigawan within our property, but further up there.
Okay.
It's kind of in a tree there. It gets into some trees up there.
okay.
Yeah.
I understand where it is now,
Yeah.
so thanks. That's all I had.
And then just, go ahead.
Oh, no, just a question, because I missed it from earlier, but the old tailings pile, is that where we were kind of possibly considering a solar field at some point? Is that? 'cause I
No,
said-
that's on the contaminated tailings pile, the CPP.
CPP, okay. Yeah. No, it's
Okay, and just to clarify, as far as the uses for each of these areas, my understanding is while we have residential recreation and open space, say for the Highlands area, those, if we decide on something different down the road, we can make those changes, correct? As long as it doesn't mess with any of the EPA stuff.
And I will want Polly to kind of confirm this, but for those areas that the comfort letter has indicated are not within the Superfund area boundaries, I believe we can change the zoning and the uses allowed on that property as a matter of just town governance. We don't have to go back to EPA for parcels that have been recognized to be outside the Superfund area.
That's correct.
And so what about the OTP? Let's say residential decide the town, from input from town, we decide not to do residential, we want to do a park or with like a winter park scenario, Spring Hill, whatever, those kinds of things. Would that change? Would that be allowed us to add that? Of course, you do have recreation in there, but let's say recreation wasn't in there and we decided to do recreation. Would we be able to change it in the OTP?
We can always go back to EPA for subsequent opinions, I guess, once you've taken title, you'll take title again, subject to this administrative order that Tim and his team have negotiated. And that sets out a process for obtaining approval for your reuse plans and how your reuse plans will affect what we call the remedy. And in this case, the remedy is this identification barrier and cap that Battle will be putting on that parcel before transfer. So should you want to do something, you would prepare plans for what you want to do, submit them to EPA. That might or might not involve disturbance of, I'll call them the dirty soils. And if it did involve some disturbance of the dirty soils, you'd have a plan for managing that and controlling the risk of disturbance and appropriately disposing of soils. And you'd get approval from EPA, and that would be your mechanism for, I guess, approval of your change in use.
Okay, I just wanted to understand how flexible we were.
Yeah, and Tim has been working under this order already. So I guess, Tim, your experience has been presumably that the process with our team has been pretty seamless, and I've certainly worked under other orders where EPA has been a good partner.
Yeah, and I would just say, Polly's correct. I mean, once it's remediated, and if it's remediated to the standards that we're supposed to meet, the EPA and CDPHE will certify that, and then residential use is allowed. So, and that's the most restrictive use, residential. But yeah, if you were gonna dig a 50-foot deep hole, or you're gonna put piles down 100 feet, you definitely would have to get EPA's, approval. But if you're gonna, just have recreation or other uses, yeah, you would confer with EPA that this is not gonna affect the cap, but there's really very little.
You'd have to do otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It would have to be something pretty major to have to get a new work plan. You'd have to be going down quite deep and re-entering that contaminated soil.
Yeah, one more use that I could imagine for at least a small piece of this property might be for town storage or town vehicles off in the periphery or something. We don't need to name that as a use at this stage, is that correct?
I would say that we have flexibility to go back to EPA, but right now would be a wonderful time to have them incorporate that into the letter that they're currently drafting. So if you see a gap there that you'd like to know at this time what EPA thinks of it, we can absolutely ask them to include it in their letter.
And Lynn, are you kind of thinking like
Municipal use.
A municipal use, yes, like way off in the corner where you can't see it. I know the town does not have
a
much land.
courtyard of some kind?
You say that again, Mike?
Okay. I was just saying, okay, we can include that in the discussion that we have Polly engage with EPA on.
And Lynn, which parcel was that for again?
That's,
The OTP.
The OTP. Thank you.
so that would be just sort of a municipal storage, vehicle storage and staging yard.
If we just put municipal, it's a blanket coverage, and then we can kind of determine that at that point, correct?
Polly, don't you think that they'll want more detail? Because municipal could be anything from, underground utilities to,
To a new city hall.
right,
Or,
things I'm sure we get,
affordable housing.
but
So I think,
surface.
I was really thinking storage.
okay.
Tom?
Yeah, my only concern moving forward, which obviously would be to coordinate with that on this. Back to you referenced 3 feet down the cap in certain parts. I would think we'd want to avoid tapping into that area and having to go back to the EPA. So if you consider average frost line here is 4 feet. So if we were working at least saying try to drive to a 6-foot backfill, not trying to get in the weeds, I'm just driving to the fact that, again, we want to mitigate, knowing full well, if we go down the road of residential, we're gonna have to go back to the EPA. Be great not to. So we can coordinate that up front to get a bare bones 6-foot, for example. That residential can then in fact put in utilities, basic foundation, etc., and we don't have to deal with that. That would be ideal.
Yep. Okay.
Would that would be part of maybe the contouring discussions, wouldn't that?
I'm sorry.
Wouldn't that like depth be?
Well, I'm just saying during his process, so we're not going back to the drawing board after the fact, as he denoted, all those things just need to get, yes, coordinated now. So that gets done, and then construction's complete and we take possession.
And I think now, okay, I only brought this up to understand the flexibility that we could do and what way we can change, which, Polly's given me that answer. If we have any uses that we may think is relevant and a good thing to do, we need to submit them now. Because otherwise it's gonna be more expensive to go through an entire process of re-vetting it with the EPA and get their approval. So I would suggest that, we think about that. When do you want to close out the?
Let me just,
Go ahead, Tim.
yeah, because I don't know, I know that's almost an impossible task, trying to think of what you might want to do on this land 20 or 30 years from now.
Mm.
And in the way, currently there's restrictive notices on it that say you can't do this, that, and the other.
Anything, actually.
So, Polly, just, we're removing the restrictive notice right now from the trestle area, which was recently remediated. So all the EPA documentation says now is you cannot disturb or go into the groundwater table without, putting together a work plan with the EPA. So they don't necessarily list what you can do. They just list what you cannot do.
Right.
And it's simple, you can, and for the OTP area, I expect it to say you cannot go into the groundwater or put a pond on this, which is going to create more groundwater going into that soil. And you cannot, pierce the soil without putting together a work plan so that the EPA can confirm that it's being done properly. So I don't know, and Polly, we have a call with the EPA tomorrow.
Mhm.
We might want to confirm this, but I don't think you have to actually, say I need storage and this and that and the other thing. It's more what's going to come out of this with the EPA is you can't do this without further work. So there's not going to be a list of uses that the EPA approves, but we might want to talk to the EPA about that tomorrow on our call.
Yeah, they do. I want to sort of step back because there were a couple of, I think, aspects to the OTP parcel that are much more complex than any of the other parcels. And starting from the comfort letter, Tim's right, comfort letters can be crafted in different ways. And the intent and what EPA likes to do is to say, okay, what do you want to do? And, we'll kind of tell you what steps would be needed to do that in a way that's safe for human health and the environment. And what they've done is they said, generally these uses are fine, for example, at the CTP site, as long as you don't pierce the cap. And that's kind of that's the nature of their response. This is really, this is a document that doesn't have any, it's called a comfort letter for a reason. It doesn't have any kind of legal binding effect on anybody, including what you do or what EPA does. It's simply an expression by EPA of, these are all uses we could imagine you doing, and we could imagine you doing them safely with no changes to the existing remedy, or we could imagine you doing them safely if you wanted to come back to us with a work plan. So it's really, in our structure, it's intended to give the town some paper that says, yes, we acquired this property or rights in this property with some sense that it has some future value to us for what we could imagine the town wanting. The really critical and more prescriptive and protective piece is the administrative order on consent that we would be stepping into. And that document is where EPA exercises its authority to approve plans and gives you legal binding protections when you are in compliance with that order. So that's what really matters here. The other is really more optics and some upfront assurances for your purposes in deciding whether to move ahead and having something that you can say to your constituents. We worked with EPA. This is what we learned. This is a good idea. So going to the OTP site, right now, as we speak, EPA says, put a fence around it and don't go in there. And that's what the restriction says. You'll restrict access, you won't use it. It needs to be cleaned up. And what the cleanup will be is what Tim's described. So day one, right now, we can't do anything there. Nobody can do anything there except execute a remedial plan. When Tim is done, then there will be this cap over the property that, you know, will allow a number of different types of uses, including residential, with some restrictions that you don't go into the dirty dirt. So that's going to happen. I think 2027 is the kind of the rough estimate. Am I getting that correct, Tim? Of when you expect the reservoir work will be done and the cap in place?
That's a rough estimate. It's really up to the water district, yeah.
Yeah, but so as soon as that work is done, then, you know, Tim goes to EPA and says, hey, we did the remedy. And EPA says, okay, and they change the restrictions on the property. And that would be the point at which the town would want to exercise their option to take title. Or start allowing, or take their easement to allow recreational access. And at that point, then, you know, you take title to the property, you would have the benefits and protections of the same order that Tim and Battle have been working under. And that would come again in the future when Tim's done and you decide to exercise an option. So this particular parcel has a timeline associated with when uses are available. That's not true of the other parcels.
So your phone call tomorrow with the EPA though will include literally going down a list of possible uses post remediation to kind of get a warm and fuzzy verification. Fact occur.
Yeah, they've drafted a comfort letter and Polly's reviewed it and we're trying to get it fine. You know, it's really, Polly is working with the EPA to get this comfort letter finalized to where town's comfortable.
Yeah, and Tim's making sure we get our facts correct.
Okay.
So hopefully that explanation was
Yeah.
verifying rather than.
My question. Is there any other questions on this particular thing or?
So what specific guidance or direction were they hoping from on this tonight?
Basically just reviewing, I'm assuming we want to review each parcel and confirm that we're still in the same place we were before with this table. Is that what you were looking for as far as direction?
Mike, can you confirm the direction? You know, we are looking for restrictions that might need to be imposed upon each parcel.
I think we're looking for three primary things: to confirm that the parcels that we've indicated we want an option on are still council's priority. Number two, to discuss any rights that the town would be obtaining in the restricted parcels. For example, the right to do outdoor recreation activities consistent with EPA restrictions is just an example. We'll kind of get into that a little more in detail. And then number three, whether there are any covenant restrictions that we need to request Mountain to put into place.
And those would be, to be clear, restrictions on what Battle does.
Correct.
And that's really the new discussion point. The others will be retreading ground we've discussed before.
Yes.
I do have a question. You're saying that one of the questions in front of us is whether we want to restrict what Battle can do on this property prior to on the restricted properties. Is that correct?
Yes.
And don't quite understand what they can do. I heard something about a water treatment plant, but I'm not sure I heard that correctly.
So they can undertake uses consistent with the open space zone district, which we approved, I don't know, three-ish council sessions ago. And one of the activities that is included in the open space zone district is to install water treatment plant and related infrastructure. Now, of course, that would have to be consistent with EPA restrictions that are an add-on to that, but Battle can use these properties consistent with the zoning. The zoning doesn't really allow for much in the way of private uses, but there are some public uses that are allowed in the open space zone district.
So if they were to build a water treatment plant on, say, the OTP, and then we issued our option to purchase it for $1, what would happen to the water treatment plant?
That's not on the OTP.
Well, I guess for clarification, when you say the open spaces district, what specific parcels does that apply to?
All the items in pink that were shown on the map, all the restricted parcels are zoned open space.
And
Yeah.
the language of the restriction is actually in the table on page 2.
Is there any way we can see that colored map again? Because I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we don't want anything done to that land that's inconsistent with what we're going to want to do with it when we exercise our option.
Yeah, so Jay, this was the first graphic that you had put up.
Yes. And just to clarify, there is, first of all, I don't think the EPA would allow us to put a water treatment plant on any
It doesn't
restricted
make any
parcels.
sense, but the pink land,
I think really the only thought was maybe we would want to run utilities through parcels, and even that, it's really maybe on the periphery of parcel 12 there that we would want, because I don't think the EPA would allow us to run any buried utilities through the CTP either, because that would go under the cap and cause problems there. So there's no way we would be able to put a water treatment plant or anything like that on these parcels. It's more the distribution lines or utility lines maybe could cut through, and even that would require a work plan and approval from EPA. And it would probably be restricted to parcel 12 there.
I'm interested Mike, if you have any recommended language that would protect us here.
So your thought, and I understand and appreciate the observation, Lynn, is that the zoning for the open space zone district could include vertical infrastructure, so not horizontal kind of underground utilities, but vertical things that could impair the value of the option that the town has in the future. And I suppose we could craft a restriction that applied to parcels 3, 4, 10, and 12 that indicated that for any vertical construction that that was prohibited without the town's approval by council. And I'd need to look at the zoning to kind of hone in on that or kind of figure out the exact verbiage, but I think we could make that happen so that there were no permanent improvements that weren't of a utility line nature that were made to these parcels prior to the exercise of the option. Lynn, does that sound consistent with your concern?
Yes, that would meet my concern.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Okay, so we've mainly been looking at the OTP. Do you want to go parcel by parcel on this, or?
Yeah, I think just real quick, Tom is newly joined council. This might provide him with some background that will be helpful for future discussion items that we have.
I agree, yeah.
So Jay, if we could go to page 1 of the chart.
That's page 59.
Hang on, I lost it. I'm trying to find it. Of the chart. Oh, there it is. Dang it. Apologize, hold on.
I think it's page 59, Jay. Okay, yeah.
There we go, great. So again, the Highlands parcel, this area is outside of the Superfund site. The town will receive fee title ownership at closing. Closing is something of a technical definition, but it essentially is once all of the contemplated approvals have been granted by the town and any appeal or referendum rights have expired. And so that, assuming that there were not, assuming that all the approvals are granted and there are no appeals or referenda, that would probably happen in July or maybe August. Existing mandated deed restrictions on town uses. So Battle has asked on the Highlands that we agree not to have industrial uses, which I think is very consistent with the discussions we've had in the past about that parcel. There might be blanket easements for roads and other infrastructure. Tim can certainly comment on this further, but as he mentioned when we had the map up, Battle is not currently thinking that this parcel will need to have reserved easements. And in terms of there really aren't any additional restrictions or covenants that would go on this land other than, again, no industrial uses for the benefit of Battle, and that they confirm that they don't have the need for any utility easements to cross that property. Tim, any clarification on that?
No, I can definitely assure we will have no utility easements anywhere near. I don't think on any of the town's parcels, and definitely not the Highlands parcel.
Okay. The Reservoir South area, this is adjacent to the Bolts Lake Reservoir parcel and toward Tigawon Road. Polly, is this area within the comfort letter that it's outside the Superfund site?
Yes, I believe we confirmed it's outside the Superfund site boundaries.
And the anticipation is that the town will utilize this for public reservoir access and recreation purposes in the future once the reservoir is built. As members of council will remember, in the agreement that we have with the RWSD related to Bolts Lake Reservoir, there are public recreation rights that are granted that the town would be able to implement in the future. Again, covenant for the benefit of Battle, no industrial uses, and again, possibly a utility for roads and infrastructure utilities, but again, as Tim mentioned, unlikely on this parcel. Any questions about the Highlands or the Reservoir South area before we move on?
Just one, and the Highlands does have a major easement that the water district has that impacts how the area can be used, correct?
The Highlands actually, if my memory serves me correctly, that easement for the bolt, it's not an easement for the Bolts Ditch. I believe they took that in fee title.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's what, 40 feet wide, Tim?
It is.
Yep,
It
40
is.
foot wide fee title.
And the town would have the ability to cross it in multiple locations. So you could put a road across it or utilities or a path or what have you.
Yeah, if you look on page 57, There's a really good graphic on, parcel 1 and 2. Which makes up the Highlands. And it shows that easement,
Yes.
or whatever you want to call it, the CEPA.
No, it's owned by ERWSD.
Yeah.
It's not an easement.
Okay.
So Tim, you're saying that we can take out the blanket easements for utilities, roads and other public infrastructure for the Reservoir South, since I'm not sure where those would go?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
There's nothing around us that
Right. I was wondering where those go.
Yeah.
The rec center parcel, again, this is over by the Minturn Fitness Center. Again, the contemplated uses are community and recreation uses, potentially arts facilities. We would obtain title to this following completion of remediation and delisting from the NPL site. We'll let Polly talk a little bit about that. But Battle, again, is not requesting any specific restrictions on how we use. Well, they are. They want a covenant that limits the use of that to community recreation, artistic, childcare, or entertainment or similar uses. We would also have the right under the covenant, assuming that we implemented zoning consistent with this, to have up to 3 caretaker or employee housing units on that site. Polly, do you want to talk a little bit about the delisting of this parcel?
Yes, so, and actually, Tim can probably talk more about the process that he's intending to follow, but in general, under the Superfund law, you have the ability following cleanup to have EPA agree that the parcel you cleaned up is no longer part of the site, and that's called a delisting process. And it involves public comment. It'll involve potentially some revisions to restrictive notices. We're still clarifying exactly what those revisions would include, but there's a whole process. And when that's done, like EPA's findings with respect to the Highway 24 parcels or the Highlands parcel, they'll say, okay, this isn't part of a Superfund site anymore, and you're free to do what you want to do. Sometimes they'll include restrictions on use of groundwater or some minor restrictions, but essentially they'll say remediation is done, not part of the site anymore, go ahead.
Yeah, and the difference with the Maloid area versus the OTP is we're actually going to physically remove any contamination that's on that site. So there's no worry of in the future you digging down into something. It's completely gone. And Polly's right, there probably still would be a restriction on pulling groundwater out of there, but that would be the only restriction that would be left on that site.
Okay. Jake, can we go down the next page?
I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Ask a question. So Tim, it's 15 years for a blanket easement on the rec center parcel?
I think what we've heard from Tim is, and subject to kind of finalization, is that for the first 3 parcels, there won't be a blanket easement because they don't believe there will be utilities or public infrastructure required on those parcels.
Yeah, and then on this parcel, Michelle, I think I just want to confirm where the existing sewer lines and water lines run. I think they're in Maloy Park Road, and if that's the case, I don't know why we'd want to cut through this parcel either.
Okay.
So we
I just wonder
we
if
could
there-
probably eliminate that as
If we
well.
can, so potential elimination or work with staff to determine least impactful easement locations for maximum use of the parcel.
Correct.
Okay.
And so, we'll, as we finalize or start work on the restrictive covenants that will be recorded as part of the closing, Tim, I'm assuming that'll kind of be the winnowing down process where you say, oh, we actually do believe we need a little sewer easement or something in a certain location, and we can work to target at that time.
Yeah, I think we can quickly understand that if it's going to be necessary or not, Mike.
Thank you. So the Highway 24 parcels, again, these are along the highway, between the highway and the river. They're not very wide, but they do include part of the river in locations, and they can provide for recreational opportunities, river access. Again, the town or Battle Mountain would like a restrictive covenant saying they won't be used for industrial use. I think that would be inconsistent with the town's goals as well. It doesn't sound like we're going to have a blanket easement or any other kind of public infrastructure easement in that location. And again, this is zoned in the holding parcel, meaning that we'll have a future planning process in front of the town to determine kind of the implementation of uses at that location. So those are the fee title parcels that the town would receive at closing or as soon as a delisting occurs. Any comments or questions from council on those parcels? Okay. So we're now moving into what are called the restricted parcels. Those are parcels that Battle Mountain or a successor in interest to Battle Mountain may have title to, but that are subject to either use rights by the town or subject to use restrictions by the town. So we've talked a lot about the old tailings pile property. That town is going to have an option to purchase that property once the remediation is completed through the construction of Bolt's Reservoir. That purchase option will be memorialized in a recorded document. The town is looking to acquire, I think, are we doing outdoor recreation up front? Jay, I don't know if you can kind of get part of that page and part of the next page on the screen.
I think what we're to chime in there, what we're hearing from EPA in our conversations is that they don't consider this parcel available for outdoor recreation right now. And so I think what we would be trying to do here is to have an option that would either be an option to take an easement for recreational use or just take title, depending on how the ultimate remediation works out in the town's interests.
So we probably are not acquiring an easement for a active use at the current time, but this parcel would be covered by a use restriction, such as what Lynn Feiger brought up, which is that, no vertical construction without the town's approval on that site.
That's right. And then the town will also take those two easement locations for access to Highlands.
Okay.
And I think that's noted at the bottom of the scope of town rights to be acquired.
Any follow-up questions or comments about the OTP and how the legal documents would be put together related to that parcel?
If I might. So Tim, what in this case, the OTP, once it's remediated and the option to purchase is provided, is on the periphery again of all of the parcels. So what would be the need for Battle to have utilities, roads, and other infrastructure?
No need.
So we can remove that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and those were included in this chart because they're identified in the settlement agreement. So we wanted to, make council aware of at least that right. But it's good to hear that Battle's planning is indicating that's not going to be needed on the critical parcels that the town is looking to acquire. So I guess the other thing would be in the third column over, we probably will not be getting an easement for hiking and Nordic skiing and trail construction until the once the remediation happens, we'll exercise our option and just purchase the property, and we can then use it consistent with town zoning. So
Polly, I believe that's consistent with what the EPA has said. Can you confirm that?
You're muted, Molly.
Holly.
I'm sorry, it is, that was the point I was trying to make earlier, is that it makes no sense to take an easement now, given the current restrictions on the site, and we received that specific, I guess, confirmation or update from EPA as part of our comfort letter discussions. So there's no sense in taking any rights in it until the work is done.
Thank you.
Okay. Jay, if you can scroll down on that page. Thank you. Okay, so the processing area is located to the south and west of the reservoir area. It will continue to be owned by Battle Mountain. It is where processing of materials related to the construction of the reservoir and the dam will occur, as well as processing of materials to go on to the OTP site. We'll have an option to purchase this after that work is completed and the property is cleaned up. It sounds like the easement for recreational hiking and Nordic skiing and associated uses probably is not appropriate or needed at the current time. So we probably are we will limit that or eliminate that. And that there are pre-existing easements for ERWSD related to the reservoir parcels. We are going to include a restriction on this parcel that precludes the use for natural resource processing for any parcel other than the reservoir parcel. In other words, we don't want the owner of this property to say, hey, we've got a property zoned for resource processing and we're willing to lease it out. Instead, this is meant for a specific purpose, which is to construct the reservoir and to complete the capping of the old tailings pile parcel. So those are the two restrictions that we intend to impose on this property. Any thoughts or comments from council about the processing area? Okay. Jay, if you can scroll down.
And Tim, I'm just going to remove that section again.
Okay, the CTP, and I'm going to let Michelle and Polly talk a little bit about what rights we feel comfortable in acquiring in the CTP, given the fact that it will continue to be an active part of remediation and water treatment for the Superfund site. And so maybe we start with what should the town sanely be contemplating in terms of what it legal interests it acquires in this parcel and the types of uses it might want to undertake on this parcel.
So I can jump in here first, and as as we've discussed, this is a site that is not just a site where there is residual contamination. It is a site where dirty dirt has been placed and capped. It's a repository site, and so it is capped. It has various kind of ditches and remedial facilities around it, as well as a water treatment facility that serves the remediation of groundwater. And that happens, most of those uses are on the northern edge of that, our map is sideways, but toward the top on our map. Our suggestion is that it doesn't make sense to acquire title to that property. It will always be subject to some level of active, or is likely to be subject to some level of active requirements throughout time. Someone's going to have to maintain that cap, work on that cap, deal with the groundwater controls. So what we've suggested here and have talked about is an option to lease it, and an immediate easement for recreational purposes. We have confirmation as part of our comfort letter that these types of recreational uses are fine as long as we don't, pierce the cap and expose the repository or the materials that are in the repository to, to wind or water or, human exposures. And the discussion has been that we would keep an option to lease it in the future in the event any other uses might be helpful to have. And for example, the comfort letter has specifically called out the opportunity to put solar facilities on that property subject to certain requirements. And there might be other uses similar to those that, as long as they didn't disturb the cap or interrupt the access that's necessary for the other facilities that are part of the remedy, they would be acceptable.
Thank you, Polly. Tim, do you have any CTP comments you want to add to that?
No, I think Polly covered it well. I mean, right now, the CTP, the surface is a cap, so it's not, you're not interacting with any contaminated soil, but the integrity of that cap is what's most important to the agency. So anything that's done there just has to protect that integrity.
And so what I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it's a layer of sand, then a layer of clay, and then soil on top of it. So it's probably a few feet deep, the cap itself. And then the contaminants are into that.
Obvious question. If we were to take possession of it, we also take the liability along with it.
Not this, well, Polly can answer this better, but you would
Yeah.
take possession as a BFPP. You're not the responsible party. The responsible party is CVS Viacom. And that's regardless. But as a BFPP, you've got to do certain things to make sure you don't do anything to make the situation worse, or you can't dig it up and then you are responsible. But the maintenance of it and the maintenance of the cap to make sure the trenches are clear, that's always going to be the responsibility of CVS Viacom.
This just brings into question the viability of solar. I mean, half the depth to put in a solar farm.
The EPA has taken a look at solar options, and it's also fairly common to put, I shouldn't say common, it is acceptable and incentivized use of repositories and landfills to put solar on them. And there are these, sort of floating foundations that don't require much depth to their foundations, so that they're suitable for those types of facilities where you have a cap and can't go below a certain cap depth. So the specific requirements that EPA outlines in the comfort letter are actually probably most helpful for this parcel, because they some of the things that Tim alluded to that you have to do to maintain your what we call our bona fide prospective purchaser status or protections from liability is to take reasonable steps. And EPA specifically outlines in the comfort letter the steps that it would consider reasonable to build solar on this site.
So this lease would take in effect this summer, right away. What term are we thinking of?
So Councilwoman, I think what we would anticipate is that we would take an option to lease, so you wouldn't have to enter into the lease right away unless you wanted to. the lease term, for those types of, my expectation from past experience is that if you intended to lease for purposes like solar farm, you would come to the table and lease with a developer and, a developer agreement already in negotiation in parallel. And those are usually 25 or 30-year leases.
Thank you.
Anything else from the CPP, Eric?
I guess, is there like any other outstanding reason why a lease would be a better option than just taking possession of that? It seems like if we're gonna do a solar field, maybe we want to own the land as well, but. I'm curious.
One reason that I would suggest a lease is it would allow you to immediately assign that lease to your solar farm and not ever actually take responsibility for the site. And that would be the one advantage of leasing. The other thing about leases is you have a little bit more capability to clarify the respective responsibilities of the parties and be very, what I want to say, insert very clear terms that limit your responsibility for anything but a very narrow scope of uses.
And I would add, you'll see in the fifth column over at the bottom that there will be a plat note restricting the conveyance. We wanted to make sure that this parcel did not end up in just kind of a random LLC ownership without any ability to manage it. As was indicated, there is going to be ongoing requirements for maintaining this parcel, including the groundwater treatment. Those would not go to the town, but we also want to make sure that whatever entity does own it has resources and capabilities to properly manage the property. And so we have restricted the ability that parcel can be conveyed to anybody other than a town, a metro district, or another district that has the ability to comply with EPA requirements and to make sure the property continues its function as a cap repository for toxic materials. So, and I think that, in terms of why would the town not want to own the property, I think the fact that there is ongoing requirements for maintenance and treatment of the groundwater, I think that militates towards that not being owned by the town.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And to put a finer point on that, you would expect in any lease to be very clear that you are not responsible for any remedy components, except just not damaging them with your uses. So you don't want to take on responsibility for inspecting the cap. You don't want to take up responsibility for maintaining the cap, except to the extent that you're maintaining your own uses and not damaging it. So those are the types of terms and conditions you can craft in a lease. It's a little bit more difficult to escape those types of obligations as an owner of the property.
I'm wondering if it's not appropriate, or maybe Michelle, this is a question of Michelle, maybe you're doing this already, to start looking around for solar farms that might be interested in this property.
So
Even though I
actually,
know we don't have a final agreement.
right, without a final agreement, but knowing this is something that the council is willing to potentially consider down the road. Earl has started in on that process with understanding the amount of energy that could be produced by a solar field of this size and what potential partners could possibly be interested. I think it could serve up to an 8 megawatt production capacity, which apparently in the solar world is small. I'm not familiar with solar world, but still very productive for certain uses. So that work has very tentatively started pending that, wanted to get further down the line with what council thought.
And our strategy here is to kind of leave you an option so that you have flexibility. You have something in hand, but you don't have to take any of that on if you don't want to.
Could we just do kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down as far as interest in if the settlement is completed, let's say in a month or two, probably a couple of months, if the due diligence is finished by then. So we can pull the trigger if council directs us to, and if not, then we'll go look at other ideas.
You mean as far as looking at solar field?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
CTP.
Mhm.
Does anybody got anything else? Okay.
So the settlement agreement made reference to a parcel called the Trestle area, and everybody will remember where the trestle is. That's been remediated, and that area is actually included in the battle retained parcel, one of the battle retained parcels. So it's not a separate parcel area. It's going to again be continued to be owned by Battle Mountain. It's subject to the residential zone district zoning. So we've simply put NA into that area. Malloy Park and Michelle or Polly, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the Malloy Park wetlands area that we're identifying here. So this area, and maybe there is a clarification to be made by staff, would be an area that the town could acquire for wildlife, recreation, fishing, hiking, Nordic skiing uses. The town would get an option for purchase, and I think so the town's not looking to acquire this property immediately because there are some potential remediation steps that still need to be taken before this property is deemed not contaminated. And Polly, maybe if you want to chime in on that, but I think there's a few what we call hot spots out in those wetlands.
Yes, this is the one we haven't fully completed our discussions with EPA, but right now recreational uses are technically not allowed in this parcel. And although they are occurring in the winter. So there's some cleanup, I'll call it cleanup, that needs to be done with respect to this parcel from a legal perspective and a legal restriction perspective to allow that winter use. And then if we were to do any other types of active recreational uses, there still is some requirement for cleanup that would be necessary.
Thank you. And so the town will receive an option to purchase at closing once that remediation and I assume delisting process has occurred.
Mike, let me just clarify.
Yeah.
We are not
The potential use. Yeah, go ahead, Tim. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There is no plan right now to actually remediate the wetlands. There are some hotspots in there, and based on discussions we've had with the agencies to try to dig dirty mud from clean mud when the water itself might be contaminated, seems like it probably will create more environmental issues than it's going to solve. And the thought was to allow natural attenuation of these contaminants to happen over time. So there is really no plan to remediate the wetlands. We're looking to remediate the upland areas, so the dry areas, but there would be no work within the wetlands themselves that is currently being proposed.
Just to clarify, yeah, that was my understanding as well, and I had heard that they considered the wetlands as a good filter for contaminants.
They do, yeah.
And so there's continually a flow of contaminants going in there. Is that the case?
Yeah, there's a lot of natural attenuation where the plants actually uptake and then the plants die and they move. And it actually, I mean, I'm not 100% sure on how it reacts with the metals, but the water's always moving, the soil's always moving in these areas, so I wouldn't be surprised if you tried to go back and find those hot spots that they're either not there or they're much lower in, the amount of contaminated material than they were 10 or 20 years ago.
Tim, can I also ask, just so no one's alarmed, because I know, and what Polly said is correct, recreation in the winter is not technically allowed out there. But it's my understanding that annually each year, the EPA has given a verbal approval for the activities that have been occurring out there.
Actually, even better, written approval via
Okay.
email.
Okay.
And as Polly said, we're cleaning that up. So I'm actually submitting a proposal to revise the restrictive notice so that it does specifically allow skiing when there's sufficient snow cover in those areas. So we don't have to get the annual approval of that.
Okay.
So is this parcel likely to be subject to delisting, or how does that affect the town's option to purchase? Because I indicated the options are going to run for 25 years. Is there any hope? I don't think the town would want to take title to this property until it was properly delisted. Is that a hope that we should be counting on, or should we be just looking at an easement interest here?
I'll speak to that a little bit. I think what has been discussed is leaving an option to purchase, principally because conditions might change. We might find that there's some great attenuation. We might find, that there's been some talk of some, and I don't know, Tim, if you've been part of this conversation, but maybe some manufactured wetlands or biocells in those areas. In other words, the idea is you're not going to have liability holding an option, but it leaves flexibility to ask to take title if it seems advantageous to the city or to the town in any future point.
And then we will take at closing an easement for certain uses that are permissible, consistent with the status.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've, part of this some of this discussion reflects exactly what's happening. We're in conversations with EPA and uncovering some issues like the issue we discovered with winter use being appropriate, but technically inconsistent with an existing restriction. So you're seeing a little bit of the flow of conversation and identification of issues that we are only now uncovering. None of them which would change kind of bigger picture strategy, just some details.
So to verify, is this parcel 12 and 13 when we say the Malloy Park?
The wetlands is only parcel 12.
Only parcel 12.
Yeah. The Malloy itself covers 13 and 15 or 16 as well. But those areas will be remediated and delisted because they're dry, and when we're able to do that work.
And I think the interest from the town was to maintain it as wildlife refuge. Because it's a bit of.
And the winter recreation that happens now with motorized vehicle that grooms it. So I guess it goes back to the question of what's wrong with taking possession of it if we're just gonna leave it as is. Are we accepting a liability? Are the hotspots identified and avoided each winter?
No, as Polly said, holding an option on it doesn't make us liable. We wait, the idea being that we would wait whatever the time limit is to see if conditions change to where we would want to do whatever future councils might want to do. And if they don't, then I would say we don't exercise the option. That's my thoughts on it anyway.
Well, regardless, nobody's gonna do anything with it, correct? It will remain as is under this agreement.
It's zoned open space, and we'll add the restriction on vertical structures. I guess, Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about roads and utilities? Because, you indicated that there is potentially one utility corridor running from one side of Cross Creek to the other that you might want to consider. And then I think the Malloy Park Road also does impact this parcel, which would be something that you would be, maintaining some rights to make some improvements in.
Yeah, Mike, I think we tried to draw the parcel so that it's outside of Malloy Park Road, but it's really close, and that's why I think we want to have the ability, if an easement along the side of Malloy Park Road is required, to be able to put a utility underground there. But the road itself is not within parcel 12. You kind of see how there's a green strip in there, and I think we tried to incorporate all of the road outside of this area. But the Malloy Park Road is a 50-foot wide easement that is owned by the school district for the passage of people onto the school district land. So that's protected no matter what.
You anticipate the utility corridor just paralleling the road there?
Yeah, if for some reason, there's a need to put some utilities and it doesn't fit within the road right away.
And improvements on that road in light of potential future development between Battle Mountain and the school district are all on the school district.
No, they would be evenly split, if we have 50% of the traffic and they have 50% of the traffic, we would split the cost 50%. That we've had preliminary conversations with them and we've discussed that. We don't have any signed agreements or anything at this point.
So an earlier plan that you had for the development in Malloy Park had the road being moved. Are you no longer have any interest in doing that?
Yeah, there was one early plan that actually moved the entrance way a few hundred yards south. I don't think that's being contemplated. I still think moving the road away from the river where it's extremely close right when you come in and there's no guardrail and you can drive off into the river because it's usually ice right there. It would be best to get that away from the river. So there might be, but there's no final plans for any reconstruction of it at this point.
And Polly, I think I may have cut you off. Did you have an additional comment about the Malloy Park wetlands?
No, I didn't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council about Malloy Park? Okay.
All right.
Do you feel you have adequate direction?
I think the one additional item that has been raised again is a covenant about above ground vertical construction of buildings that are not well, we'll work with Battle Mountain on a proposed language and bring that to council as an additional restriction for the restricted parcels that are located in the open space zone district.
Any concerns?
And the intent that
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Are you frozen? Oh. Tim, anything else?
No concerns.
Anything else from council? Okay. That sums it up then.
Great.
So we will go on to the next item for the fun stuff, committee and board assignments.
Thank you. Congratulations, everyone, on
Thank
their
you, Tim.
elections and re-elections.
Thanks, Tim.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Polly.
And yeah, Polly, I think you and I can both drop off. Michelle, is any concern with that?
I hope this should be okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you
All
both.
right. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So here we're going to just take a few minutes to talk about members of council and representing the council and the town of Minturn on elected boards or representative boards, other government agencies, and membership entities. So we have several other organizations where council members either sit on boards or sit as part of a roundtable. And this is the time every 2 years after an election where we determine who will represent Minturn under what capacities. So although I put blanks in spaces where Terry or a former council member may have left and that seat is specifically open, certainly other council members should speak up if they're wanting to switch or have opportunities to sit on other boards. I put as an example, I would just say as an example, the first option up here is the Minturn Education Fund, which right now Kate Shafani sits on. There is a blank space because the council has the option of having up to 2 council members on this board. And then I sit as the ex officio seat on the board. So if, as an example, if Kate is no longer interested in sitting on this board and wants to consider something else, I ask you, please, speak up so that we can have a very robust discussion on representations and who fills what seats. So we're going to start with the Minturn Education Fund.
This was great. Just outlook on the future of the world. As the people applying for it asked.
You literally give money to
To Minturn
students,
students
to Minturn students.
who are doing amazing things.
Yes. And it typically meets once or twice a year. The annual meeting is to occur, I believe, the second Tuesday of every January, which is, I think, never occurred.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
But you're on the board, what do you mean?
Well,
And then we meet again for interviewing the students prior to providing grant scholarship awards. So Kate, are you still interested in sitting on this? Awesome. Thank you so much. And is there anyone else that would like to sit on this board?
I'll do a second on that one.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, these kids are all right.
Yeah, and time commitment is limited, so yeah.
It's not
Right on my alley.
Okay, the next opportunity to present itself is the Minturn Fitness Center. So I am aware that although Brian Rodine is on here, I believe he is also interested in being considered for other items. So this has up to 2 seats available.
That'd be interesting.
I think you might have a conflict of interest
Why would there be a conflict with that?
because the board oversees your boss, who oversees you.
It's backwards.
I'd be interested in that one.
Gus,
I would be interested as well.
What's that?
Okay.
This is comical.
I don't have a lawyer with me. I'm taking over.
I will get one, not to worry.
Well, he's actually technically your lawyer, not mine. Okay, so I have Gusty and Lynn for the Minturn Fitness Center. Northwest COG, Colorado Council of Governments, Eric, you currently sit on that. Are you comfortable with that? Are you wanting to be removed and have someone else consider that? What are your thoughts?
If someone else would like it, I would happily give that one up.
Okay, and Greg, do you want to give a quick overview of kind of the gist?
I honestly have not sat on any of those yet
Okay.
because I was appointed or added on that when Tom stepped down, so I haven't served on
Their
this.
meetings are like on Tuesday afternoon in Silverthorne.
They go quite a while too. They start at like 10 and go until
You
like
guys,
4.
you'll need this talking up a little.
I've actually done a bunch of them and it's kind of around a lot with housing, trying to push
Yes.
is what the agendas are.
And economic development, and this is a Northwest Colorado Council of Governments. So it is representation from the Northwest region of Colorado, all of the municipalities and possibly counties get together, like Gussie said, talk economic development, housing, and a variety of other matters, but those are the primary discussion points.
Okay, so how, and that's a quarterly meeting or not?
It's usually like every 2 months, it seems like. They have them pretty regular.
But they have them in Silverthorne?
I've done most of them Zoom,
Oh,
but I've only gone to one live one, but yeah, most of the time they are in Silverthorne. That's where I think their home office is at.
If no one wants to take it, I'll remain on that spot, but
Well, you know, Brian's not here.
It's happened before.
Always show up to the one where they put you on committees.
Um,
did Brian give you a list of the committees he wanted?
He did not.
He was
No,
gonna
he
try
just
to-
indicated in a separate email that he was looking to step down from the fitness center.
Well, you can replace the fitness center with Northwest Cog.
Are you all nominating Brian?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's do that. I warned him that if you didn't show up at this meeting, he was gonna end up with some appointments he might not like.
Honestly, on Northwest Cog and QQ, me and George kind of teamed it, you know, in case he missed one, and then I would fill in for him. I mean, I'd be willing to do that with Brian if he'd be the primary on Northwest Cog. And then if he would be my secondary on QQ, just in case something would come up, which very seldom I have anything come up because we are home a lot, but
So these meetings happen at different times. Is that correct?
they're not in conjunction. A lot of the same peoples and, you know, the both of them, yeah.
Let's give Brian a go.
Okay, and Gusty is the backup.
Yeah,
Water quality quantity. Right now, we have Gusty sitting on that.
I'd stay on it and then maybe hopefully Brian would volunteer to be a backup in case, but I don't see missing any of them, but you never know.
That's great. I'll also be attending them as well.
Okay.
If you need a third backup, I
There we go.
have my life and water issues.
Wonderful. I'll put a question mark at Brian. Okay. Eagle Valley Transit Authority. Which is no longer a board. Yes, it is a
Yes,
board.
it
I
is.
was thinking Eco Transit, sorry.
And it's not quarterly, it's monthly.
Yeah, we should not have put Claire Wilson on there. I need to update that to Tanya Allen. So monthly commitment as a sitting board representative on behalf of the town of Minturn.
And I'm fine to stay. I don't. Was Brian happy to be an alternate on that, or
He did not mention.
he didn't mention it?
If
So,
Brian doesn't want to be relieved, I'd be willing to do that.
we'll leave it as is and see where he stands, because I know he was wanting to get. CAC, right? Or was he?
Well, he wanted to be, oh, actually, yeah, I didn't have a chance to ask him. about that.
Okay, so we'll leave it as is, I think, right now, and we'll see
Okay.
what happens.
And if Brian's not interested, Lynn is a potential backup? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes,
Okay.
so,
Representation to membership entities. High Five Media, who is here filming our council meeting today. That was formerly Terry.
what are you doing so far on committees?
Nothing.
Oh, we'll fix that.
I'll take Radio Free Minturn. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Any other high fivers?
I'd be interested in, do we know? Because Terry's not here, do we know what the time commitment on those ones are?
That's quarterly. Austin, how long do those meetings last? Do you have any idea?
Hour.
Yeah, I was on it a long, long time ago, but that was a long, long time ago. And it was very brief.
Okay,
I think I would do.
all right. Colorado Association of Ski Towns.
I'm good, or maybe, yeah, that's it. I think we're solid there.
Does Michelle want to give that one up? As the alternate?
Yeah, any of council is welcome. Okay.
Good.
Yeah. In fact, if you see my name anywhere. Climate Action Collaborative.
Definitely want to stay on it.
Eric's
Make it there.
Take it over.
Climate Action Collaborative is Eric, and Eric, you probably know better than I do. We need a backup for that.
I would prefer one, just
Okay.
given my.
I think that's
my
like-
schedule.
And you're on quite a few now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who would like to back up on Tom? Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure. I don't have any bosses on that one, do I?
Oh, jeez.
That's what I was thinking.
Starting early.
Yep.
All right, Eagle County Community Wildlife Roundtable. So the roundtable meets. I feel like they meet quarterly, but I get all the emails, but it seems a little sporadic. But this is an organization that talks all things wildlife, wildlife preservation. It gets a little political in regards to supporting or opposing potential PUD applications with that throughout the county. You can attend either in person or via Zoom. And in order, well, a single council member could not oppose an outside PUD application on behalf of the council. You would have to, have a statement as yourself as a singular council member.
Yeah, and I think basically, if we're having a PUD and they're objecting to it, push back and get solutions in between. I certainly don't mind. I think we need to be active with wildlife, taking care of wildlife on development, as far as developments go. So I think it'd be, the representatives should be coming back to council and say, this is what this is looking at. And we do have Devin from CPW that we're asking, we're now having them included on any development projects in Minturn as far as a recommendation body. All they can do is recommend, but we make sure that we don't. In order we can design around any concerns as far as that goes.
The topics are more than just development PUDs, correct?
They're about native species. Right now, they're looking at mapping of the Meadow Mountain corridor as it relates to wintering elk habitat and impacts that, may or may not want to be considered in that area based on the wildlife migration patterns.
I would be interested in that.
Me too.
Tom, did you say me too?
Yeah,
I did,
Okay, I'll let you two decide.
if you want to.
no, the two.
You want one or two people?
Actually, you're welcome to have two people.
Okay.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I will, and then I'm so sorry. We have Eagle County Housing and Development Authority Advisory Committee. Kate, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, that one's really cool because it's just the community trying to solve the housing crisis in the valley. Super interesting understanding projects and resources that are available for like large developments and single people, what the housing authority is trying to do. So it's great.
I'll be a backup on that one
Kate, are you wanting to stay on that?
And if you're super passionate about it, I will.
I was on that when I was on council last and I really enjoyed it as well. So, I'll back you up.
Great.
Because I don't want to put too much on my plate, but if you want to say.
Okay,
And then I'd like to also see if we can really make one agenda item a little bit more lively as far as committee reports. I'm as guilty as anybody here, or probably more guilty than a lot, but I'd like to say anytime after y'all have had a meeting, if you can just take some notes so that you could make a comment on it, inform us what's going on with your committees. Well, that's, we're representing ourselves there, but it's good to also keep everybody up to snuff on the committees that they're participating in. And I'll try to do a better job myself as well. So I'd just like to see if we can enliven that a little bit.
that'll be so valuable as some of these seats will be taking more of a political position with state legislation that'll be helpful for the town to know and keep an eye on. Other things like the Community Wildlife Roundtable would be helpful for the town to understand, you know, potential impacts to our, you know, town boundary areas that might be coming. So very helpful communication piece. Okay. That's
It
all I
is,
have.
if it gets really political on any of these boards, it would be important to consult with the rest of council to make sure council is approving any directions. We get council direction on that, so.
Thank you.
Oh, no. Just done with the committees, right?
Yes.
All right, so. Future agenda items, you can see we've got a lot going on.
Yes, and one of the future agenda items that, you know, council has identified is readdressing the definition of an SFE. And I had a very good conversation with water attorney Susan Ryan and Christy Radabaugh, who manages Minturn's water rights portfolio today. And we're going to be preparing some work for an upcoming executive session to talk about the impacts that could have to the 3030 water court case. So that council is fully aware of what potentials could occur before final direction is given on when to move forward with amending the definition of an SFE.
Question on that.
Yes.
As opposed to like altering the definition of an SFE, is there latitude to look at particular types of housing and say that like, if you have a triplex, do all three of those have to be in SFE? Or is it like, because they share an outdoor area, part of the SFE is outdoor irrigation, like we wouldn't necessarily have to assign one to a housing type like that. Does that make sense?
Let me say, and you'll kind of figure if it made sense, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is we are looking at multiple SFE definition scenarios, which would identify a triplex as potentially half an SFE or a 0.3 of an SFE. But that our definition of an SFE is very clear that a triplex would be 3 SFE. So that would require a changing of the definition. But we are looking at a spreadsheet option whereby apartments half an SFE, you know, or something, you know, 0.3, and we're breaking it out. And those are things that council will have to consider if they want to go forward with, or if they want to go forward with a more traditional following ERWSD's definition, which is a flat 1, no matter what. We'll bring all of that forward to you pending if you give final direction to start moving in that direction.
And will, are the definitions for SFE that you're looking at, do any of them take into account outdoor area?
I expect all of the definitions that we look at and present to council to have smaller outdoor irrigation options available, unless council gives staff direction to go in a different form. So right now we have 2,000 square feet of outdoor irrigation for 1 SFE. And I expect in all scenarios, new development would be given less than 2,000 square feet of outdoor irrigation, given that most of our current lots have less than 2,000 square feet of irrigation.
Would credits be given to things like xeriscaping and that kind of thing?
For an SFE off, so that is a question slightly above me, but I would think no. Because the credits you were talking about is in water savings from your bill, not from the SFE being cut down. You'll save on the volumetric side of your water bill. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up. Council had given me that direction. I went back, I said, you know, here's the direction I've been given. That we all, as a kind of an internal team, said, let's make sure council has the full picture of all the implications before we move forward here. And we'll bring that forward to you in an executive session. I believe we're aiming for the May 1st council meeting.
You also have amending the nuisance code relating to wildlife.
That will be coming for you at the next meeting.
Okay, would that also be considering, I want to definitely want council to readdress to have another look at, leash laws where in areas where, winter trails are closed due to elk habitat. And I think we should have moved forward last time, but I really think that this is something that is a minor inconvenience. I mean, beyond minor, but you know, we're letting dogs run. We're, a couple 100 yards away, there's elk, up on the ridge, wintering out. And we're closing trails just to keep them from having to move because of what we're doing, and we're not controlling our dogs.
We talked about that last year
Yeah.
when we did the tree burning this year. We got up there early and I'll take everything up there, and there was 2 guys up there with their dogs just running everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and that was where we had the moose episode last year, so.
So if that is, so as you stated, council's discussed the leash law before. If council is interested in discussing the leash law again, as it pertains to areas of wildlife corridor closures, that can be added to a future discussion.
I'd be in favor of that. I think the biggest thing is defining them, because the road up behind our house is a dog free for all. Every morning, it's just wall-to-wall dogs, and I'll have a whole trash bag full of poop to clean up here this year, because they're all in our backyard doing it. But there's elk and deer right up on that hill year round. I mean, that's one area that's gonna be affected. I'm sure you're gonna have people mad, because that's where they take their dogs every day.
And are there owners with the dog?
Down at the bottom of the hill, dog's up top of the hill, dog does its duty, comes back down, owner walks off, pile stays up there on the road.
Same thing around the midterm townhomes. That happens a lot, but
Yeah, we see a guy every night walking over there on the hill with the light on the Midburn Townhomes, walking his dog on the hill in the winter time. Yeah, he's up there all the time.
But I imagine he picks up his dog poop.
What's that?
I hope he picks, we hope he picks it up.
But we hope so too. But again, it's back to Orioles point, with the elk, they were all up there a week ago, and if you're walking the dog, what's it doing to the wildlife?
I will say that I have been talking to Nathan Leonard, who runs the Eagle County Animal Shelter. And I specifically asked for more monitoring of the Little Beach Park area, because we do have the command law, voice command law. And since that request has been made, we have gotten, I think, 3 violations of voice command, which in the 6 years I've worked as town manager, I've never seen a violation of voice command. So that was a start. And I think there's a much greater need in that area personally.
Yeah.
So if there's 4 of you willing and interested in having that conversation, we can get it on an upcoming agenda. Okay.
And also, take pictures. I don't have a whole lot of abuse going on where I live, but yeah, if you see a dog running loose and the owner's not close enough to pick up poop, that's a violation, right?
It's a violation not to pick up the poop in any form.
Well, just to clarify, since we seem to have gone off on a tangent of poop bags. I thought we were talking about seasonal wildlife corridor closure areas that clearly people are letting their animals run free in. Which last time I checked, the area is closed. Should be specified for both 4-legged and 2-legged critters, correct? Am I wrong?
The area above the hill. So the Minturn mini mile area, as an example,
Right.
that trail is closed. We still have people that violate that closure, and when they come down from that hike, if sheriff's office has been called, they get a violation notification. However, what this discussion is identifying is areas near wildlife closure corridors, because dogs can cover such a big distance when they are off leash. So as an example, this discussion will encompass the railroad tracks starting at the Little Beach Park parking lot heading south to Elk Trailhead, as an example. So although that's not technically closed, it is in fact private property and illegal to be on there to begin with. But it's not technically part of the mini mile closure, as an example. But it's a part of the bigger area which dogs have the ability to cover.
And so that's why I think leash law is needed, and so if the dog's not on a leash, you're instantly in violation. So I think that's a good thing for discussion, so
And
if
we had-
council would like to have that on a future agenda item, we can schedule it in.
Good.
Do we
Good
have,
on it too.
do we have four?
Yeah.
Four, okay.
Yes.
Well, like I say, Eric,
Question on the future items, irrigation tiered water rate structure.
Yes, so
What's-
we have started work on that. So it gets a little complicated. But we are looking to mimic ERWSD's outdoor irrigation and sprinkler system metering for water systems, for outdoor water systems. So what that work entails is right now Madison is doing aerial views of all of our irrigation and sprinkler accounts, taking square footage area of the permeable surface. And then we work with Eagle County to understand how much water that should need over a summer, or over a month-long period, to properly water. And then we base water rates off of that tiered system, and it gets a little complicated, so I'm sorry that I'm not explaining it all that well. But we're working with ERWSD to exactly mimic their irrigation and sprinkler water rates, which comes down really, quite frankly, just to the science of how much water should you be using for your outdoor landscape. And then once you start going over that, it gets pretty pricey.
And they have a pretty good FAQ page on ERWSU's website if you're interested in more.
I guess.
And just one other thing, in terms of a status report on where we are with the appraisals of the Battle Mountain properties. Are we going to get that fairly soon, or are there problems?
So just to wrap up, we're working on that now.
Yeah.
And I am, like Kate was kind of talking about, I'm trying to kind of better educate myself, like I'm becoming a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And so we will be bringing that forward to council, I hope by mid-May, in time for irrigation season.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. And then Lynn, you are correct. We are in the final stretches right now of the Battle Mountain parcel appraisals, which we will bring to the council. In fact, while we were in council, I emailed John Lingle, who's doing the appraisals. He's been doing appraisals in Eagle County for over 30 years. And Mike and I just had a follow-up meeting with him about 3 weeks ago with his initial draft. Mike sent him back to the drawing board on a couple things because Mike is, so great with land use. So I was very appreciative to have Mike's input on the appraisals, and John will be coming back to us with a final draft shortly. Another thing that we're working on with Battle North Diligence is title work. So we're working on getting the title work right now for the parcels. So that's going through land title now.
And is there extension up to November?
No, I believe it's to June.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think we're on schedule.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Good.
And then as was mentioned in an earlier council, internal council update, we have started the very, very initial educational pieces to get us going on the Eagle River Quiet title work. So that will be from Bellum Bridge area to Cemetery Bridge area.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, good work.
Keep me busy.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I heard a motion to adjourn.
Kate seconds.
Motion by Eric, second by Gussie and Kate, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah, that one. Like Flower Garden. And the other one there, so I think it's just like a campaign, it was Corbell. And then we had one.
We're going to-
It was good. Yeah. But we still.
Good.